Good morning, and welcome to the second day of the 5th International Conference on Natural Resources and Sustainable Environmental Management. Today, we are having 4 consecutive sections, and this session is the first session on Day 2, Room 1 presentations. In this session, we are hosting the Rector of Istanbul Yeni Yüzyıl University, Professor Dr. Yaşar Hacı Salihoğlu, Professor Dr. Erkan Şahinkaya from Medeniyet University, Branch Manager of the Gendarmerie and Coast Guard Academy, Dr. Hayrettin Küpeli, Dr. Murat Aslan from Istanbul Sabahattin University, and Professor Adel Ali Said from the University Tun Hussein Othman, Malaysia. Welcome, professors, and thank you for joining this session. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Hayrettin Küpeli to deliver the first presentation.
Thank you. Good morning all from a beautiful Ankara morning. Let me share my presentation first. Is it okay?
Yes, doctor.
Okay, thank you. Dear moderator, professors, and distinguished audience who are listening to us, first of all, I would like to express my happiness for this opportunity. I work in Turkish Gendarmerie and Coast Guard Academy, which is the only higher education institution that educates law enforcement officers and non-commissioned officers for Gendarmerie General Command and Coast Guard Command. Recently, Gendarmerie and Coast Guard organizations have an important role in new nuclear power plant projects regarding the protection and security. Thus, we have been in close cooperation with Turkish Nuclear Regulatory Authority, Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources, and International Atomic Energy Agency on a wide range of topics such as legislation, strategy, and education. Besides, critical infrastructure protection is one of my academic study fields. So, today, I will try to share my arguments with you with the background of both academic and practical experiences on nuclear energy, as well as the role and activities of International Atomic Energy Agency for international guidance and collaboration. Okay. Firstly, please let me brief what we will talk about. I think explaining nuclear reaction and how it's used as a weapon or for peaceful purposes will be a proper introduction. Of course, today our focus is not war or nuclear weapons, so as an energy source, I will try to convey the basics of a nuclear power plant secondly. Don't worry, I'm not a nuclear engineer, so it won't be a nuclear physics lesson. However, I think we need to understand how a nuclear power plant works, basically at least, to assess the cleanness of nuclear energy. Then I will try to summarize common perspectives to show different arguments and reasoning on how clean is nuclear energy. After this relatively technical and theoretical section, which I aim to build a solid ground, I will explain the circumstances and motives which led to foundation of International Atomic Energy Agency. Before a discussion on the role of agency in ensuring clean nuclear energy, we need to know what are the main activity fields. Following this part, I will conclude by a discussion on if we need such an agency and how it's effective. Okay. Nuclear as a word refers to atom's nucleus. So there are 2 types of nuclear reaction known to humankind to date. First one is fission reaction. In this one, neutrons, which are subatomic particles, are used for an artificial bombardment on atoms of heavy and unstable elements like uranium and plutonium. After the bombardment begins, atoms divide with three new products. The first one is thermal energy. Second one is new elements with different atomic structure. And the last product is new neutrons, which will continue bombarding nearby atoms. When the reaction comes to a certain point, it becomes a chain reaction and continues on its own without the igniting artificial neutron bombardment. This moment is called being critical. There is no carbon emission in this reaction. However, because the living creatures are made of atoms too, being exposed closely to such a reaction means to be under bombardment in atomic scale, which will spoil the integrity of tiny pieces of plants, animals, and humans. Humans are capable of increasing these destroying effects, like we have seen in this end of Second World War. But luckily, we also know how to control it and produce energy without unwanted negative side effects. This kind of reaction is used in Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs, and it is the only reaction in all commercially active nuclear power plants today. There is another nuclear reaction which is much more powerful and radioactively clean. It's called fusion. Men have managed to use this reaction in bombs in 1950s. However, for energy producing purposes, there are ongoing scientific research to build a nuclear fusion power plant. It's mostly because of a practical challenge. Fusion reaction requires very high temperature, like 10 to 15 million Celsius degrees. This kind of reaction has been happening for billions of years in our sun, but reaching those degrees in a controllable environment is a real technical challenge. Of course, if you do not care about harming people or other living creatures, you could reach those temperatures with an initial fission explosion before a fusion explosion, which was the basic principle of hydrogen bomb in 1950s. So we could say that nuclear reaction is a high power energy source with its own challenges. One could use it as a weapon or for the sake of humanity. Producing controllable energy or an explosion is a matter of proper circumstances. I'd like to give an example at this point. We all heard about C4 plastic explosives. You can burn it like you could see in the video. By the way, I certainly do not recommend to use it in your chimney instead of wood. Okay. But if you put a detonated cap inside it, like you see in the photo at the right side, the reaction will be very fast, which we call explosion. If you put aside the needed enrichment level, more or less similar process is valid in nuclear reaction. In other words, nuclear explosion is instant fission or fusion reactions. A fission explosion requires weapons-grade 90% enriched uranium or 93% enriched plutonium. On the other hand, nuclear power plants use natural or enriched uranium 2 to 5%. This means a nuclear explosion in a power plant is technically not possible. However, radioactive materials are main problem in case of an accident or an attack. Okay, let me leave nuclear weapons for another day and proceed with peaceful use of nuclear energy. Today, peaceful usage of nuclear or radioactive material has several areas such as medical, scientific research, industry, and energy generation. Among these, nuclear power plants are the subject of discussion on whether they are a good solution to increasing energy demand or the potential actors of a possible apocalypse. We have two main types of reactor technologies at the moment. These are classified depending on their working principle. Today, 3+ generation reactors are in use and research on 4th generation reactors are ongoing. I do not want to make you struggle with technical details, but with the help of a scheme which shows the basic working principle of the pressured water reactor, which is one of the most common types nowadays, we may clarify the subject more. Okay, we are looking at 3 cycles in this scheme. At the left side, you will see the vessel, which contains reacting nuclear material and the first cycle. There is water in the vessel, and nuclear reaction constantly heats this water, which reaches to a temperature more than 300 Celsius degrees. Water keeps its liquid form because of pressure. This hot water heats the water in the second cycle, like a radiator in your room, while losing some of its own energy and goes back to the vessel, which it will be heated again. The water in the second cycle evaporates and the steam is used to spin a turbine, which is connected to an electric generator. The steam cools in condenser and becomes water again with the help of cooling water in the third cycle. The water in the third cycle is taken from a river or sea and released back after usage. This cooling water is a couple of degrees hotter than the beginning when it's pumped back to river or sea. Sometimes the water in the third cycle is cooled by letting it flow down through high towers, which are iconic for a nuclear power plant. The thing that comes out of the towers is just steam. During the process, the nuclear material is kept in a concrete and steel containment structure, which is built to survive a plane crash according to current standards. Although nuclear material is very efficient in comparison to fossil fuels, it does not last forever. After a while, uranium loses its ability to continue chain reaction to produce enough thermal energy. This means a challenge because you have to put fresh fuel in the system and dispose of the spent one. However, spent one is still highly radioactive and you cannot stop the reaction just like you did in your room to turn off the lights. So you have to dispose of it without harming the environment. Spent fuel is kept in on-site cooling pools for 1 year or more at first. After cooling enough, there are 2 choices. The first one is transferring for long-term storage directly, or spent fuel could be sent to reprocessing facilities to separate usable elements and the waste. In the latter, the waste is transferred to long-term storage after separation. Long-term storage could be in pools, dry storage facilities, or deep geological formations. Until now, I tried to explain some basic technical issues about nuclear reaction and nuclear power plants in order to assess comprehensively the cleanness and specific needs in the sector for safety of people and environment. Now, it's time to ask questions: what counts as clean energy and could nuclear energy be counted in? When I searched the mostly referred English dictionaries, I found the definition clean energy only in Collins Dictionary. The definition is as follows: energy as electricity or nuclear power that does not pollute the atmosphere when used, as opposed to coal and oil. Other dictionaries have no definition for the term. This is because it's not so clear and may refer to different types of energy generation. When we look at other documents for a universal definition of clean energy, the result was same. In a UNDP research paper, there is not an exact definition, but explanation on what the term tends to. The explanation is as follows. Clean energy tends to refer to non-conventional, non-fossil fuel sources of energy and can include a range of energy sources from nuclear and hydro energy and biofuels to a range of renewable energies such as wind, solar, geothermal, tidal power, and biomass. In a USA Congress research report, the lack of universal definition of clean energy is clearly stated. We might enlarge the examples, but I think I made my point. So we could say that there is no universal consensus on the definition of clean energy. Mostly, it looks like clean energy refers to zero or low carbon emission. Renewable energy sources like solar or wind certainly regarded as clean energy sources, but in some definitions, nuclear energy, which is our focus, is also counted as clean. To answer the question, can nuclear power provide clean energy, we should dig a little deeper. I want to share some quotes from scientific articles written by the authors of different nationalities in order to see different perspectives. Three academicians from Canada and France argues that nuclear power can reduce the cost of generating clean energy significantly and relatively quickly. However, beyond a few decades, the role of nuclear power may be considerably reduced as uranium becomes scarce and renewables become economical. Academicians from Russia tells us that they consider nuclear power as a cleaner alternative to hydrocarbon fuels in case of if other sources are insufficient for satisfying existing or potential demand. Clinicians from Malaysia argues that in OECD countries, nuclear energy plays a pivotal role in protecting the environment. On the contrary, non-renewable energy sources tend to increase carbon dioxide emissions. They say their results support the notion that electricity generated by nuclear source leads to lower carbon dioxide emissions without retarding the long-run growth in OECD countries. Academicians from Bangladesh argues that comparing with other energy structures, nuclear electricity chain emits a limited amount of greenhouse gas. They develop their argument as climate changing issues have larger impact than the policies which are against nuclear electricity production. The scientists from USA drove our attention to growing energy demand and increasing percentages of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere by telling, as greenhouse gases accumulate in the atmosphere, finding to generate power cleanly, affordably, and reliably is becoming more pressing imperative. Nuclear power is not a silver bullet, but it's a partial solution that has proved workable on a large scale. Also, in an article written by 10 authors from Australia, China, Germany, USA, Poland, and Japan, the advantages of nuclear fission energy in short term are emphasized with the growing awareness day by day. Also, fusion technology presented as an important hope for the future by the world. Great hope is associated with nuclear fusion that is expected to be the ultimate environmentally friendly solution to sustainable electricity production and the elimination of the emission of greenhouse gases. Fusion as an energy source is scrutinized in another article written by two authors in Belgium. The authors drove our attention to advantages of fusion technology and use these words. To be able to satisfy future energy needs, we therefore have to invest in all viable energy options compatible with our environment. Fusion is one of these options and is characterized by exclusive properties, some of which represent distinct advantages over the other major energy sources. The academicians specify these advantages in three main areas, which are fuel supply, inherent safety, and less harmful environmental effect. Okay, so what should we understand from these arguments? We could summarize the main points as follows. Unlike fossil fuel-fired power plants, nuclear reactors do not produce air pollution or carbon dioxide while operating. Fuel mining, building, or other processes may produce pollution like other kinds of energy generating. But nuclear energy is not a silver bullet regarding the harmful potential. However, taking into account the potential problems of climate change because of increasing carbon emitting, it's a viable option, especially in short and mid-term. Current fission reactors have to be bound with strict rules in order to prevent harm to environment from radioactivity and radioactive waste. Fusion reactors are very promising energy sources due to the efficiency, safety, sustainability, and radioactive-free manner. According to last year's statistics, there are 442 operational and 52 under construction nuclear power plants in the world. When we look at over 500 power plants in total, scattered every continent, we could say that accidents or attacks is not only one country's problem regarding the possible consequences. Also, nuclear technology may be used for weaponizing purposes. Developing strategies and technologies for safety and security should become widespread. International Atomic Energy Agency is related with all these challenges. In this part, I want to talk about how and when International Atomic Energy Agency was founded. On December 8 of 1953, USA President Eisenhower made a speech named Atoms for Peace in the United Nations General Assembly. USA initiated a program later with the same name. This program was judged as a Cold War strategy by some authors. However, it could be seen as a turning point for peaceful use of atomic energy, which was mostly a war and weapons issue to date. USA was trying to balance the fear from the nuclear weapons with the hope of a new energy source, according to some interpretations. Atoms for Peace program had 81 nation-state members in 1956 and was considerably successful on global acceptance basis at least. The program was the intellectual basis for International Atomic Energy Agency, which was founded in 1957 and Non-Proliferation Treaty in 1970. International Atomic Energy Agency still uses Atoms for Peace slogan. In a conference on October 23rd of 1956, foundation document of International Atomic Energy Agency was signed. However, foundation date is regarded as July 29th of 1957, which is the date of USA ratification. Today, the headquarters of the agency is in Vienna. Besides, there are laboratories, regional offices, and national offices that are scattered to different locations. There are 173 member states to the agency, and it is a quite powerful network with over 2,500 personnel in more than 100 countries. I want to summarize agency's priorities and activities briefly now. International Atomic Energy Agency's priorities are peaceful use of nuclear technology, safety and security, and non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. Peaceful use of nuclear technology means supporting member states to use nuclear technology for peaceful purposes, ensuring technology and information transfer. Safety and security are about protecting individuals, communities, and environment from harmful effects of ionizing radiation. Non-proliferation of nuclear weapons involves verification of states' commitments on using nuclear technology for peaceful purposes via safeguard system. Coherently with this prioritization, there are three main activity fields of the agency. The first one is nuclear safeguards, which are the means to verify a state's compliance with its undertaking to accept an International Atomic Energy Agency safeguards agreement on all nuclear material in all its peaceful nuclear activities, and to verify that such material is not diverted to nuclear weapons or other explosive nuclear devices. Therefore, these means are related with nuclear arms control. The second activity field is safety. It means the achievement of proper operating conditions, prevention of accidents or mitigation of accident consequences, resulting in protection of workers, the public, and the environment from undue radiation hazards. Nuclear safety is about protecting people and the environment from plant malfunction and human error. The last activity field is security. It's about the prevention and detection of and response to theft, sabotage, unauthorized access, illegal transfer, or other malicious acts involving nuclear material, other radioactive substances, or their associated facilities. These activities focus on malicious acts by non-state actors. There are several details under these headings. However, our time is not enough to explain all. Instead, I will say that the agency focuses on guidance and counseling on safety and security issues to member states. On the other hand, regarding safeguards, there is an inspection and verify system which agency works in coordination with member states again. So, as an answer to the question if we need International Atomic Energy Agency, we may summarize some important points as follows. Nuclear power has a potential for the sake of humankind and the environment. Malfunctions because of accidents or attacks may pose horrible consequences. Nuclear technology could be used for malicious activities, and preventing them requires international cooperation. Nuclear energy sector has to be highly standardized, highly precise, and need high-level proficiency. To be able to successful, professional guidance is helpful. To be safe and secure, international cooperation and information sharing could be useful. Taking into account all these, an institution like International Atomic Energy Agency looks like mandatory. How about agency's effectiveness? We could specify prominent issues by an evaluation of current situation. International Atomic Energy Agency has a comprehensive publication collection which covers guidance material from technical level to strategic and political level. Also, special review and counseling services are available for member countries. Most of the countries in the world are members of International Atomic Energy Agency. Therefore, agency has an ability to reach worldwide. Especially in nuclear energy sector, there is a high standardization as in aviation. International Atomic Energy Agency has an important role in this standardization. However, agency mostly make recommendations and has restricted enforcement capability due to current international system.
Sir, I apologize to interrupt. We're running out of time, sir. Can you please?
I'm finishing. The last words.
Okay. Thank you.
Finishing. Which states are main decisive actors? Okay, I finished. Thank you for listening and for your patience. I will be happy to answer if you have any questions. I don't know, we may do that at the end of the session. Thank you again.
Thank you very much for your very valuable presentation, sir. If we have any questions, but as I'm checking, we don't have any questions at the moment. So maybe at the end of the session, if we have any questions, we will direct them to you, Dr. Hayrettin Küpeli.
I will be here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Okay, as our guest and keynote speaker, now I would like to invite Dr. Murat Arslan from Istanbul Sabahattin University to deliver his presentation.
Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for your invitation and accepting my proceeding. Today, I will discuss a dilemma that's newly emerging in academia. It's about resource scarcity, digital transformation, and its effect to state authority if the newly emerging Z generation is concerned because of the consumption habits, and in the meantime, the security of consumption through, producing more and more, but degrading nature. So there happens a dilemma. This is my argument. And the question of this proceeding is, to what extent this dilemma can be kept under control, or is it manageable? This is the question I'm trying to answer in my proceeding. Shrinking resources due to the human-led devastation of nature has been the normalized course of the current century that can be compared to the digital transformation. In this context, resource scarcity can be correlated by its effects on consumption trends and sense of its absence in case used to have goods and services evaporates for the new Z-type generations. The individuals of modern century expect to reach the comfort provided by the exploited resources, mainly taking the state actors as the essential regulator of the production and consumption cycle. Once a state actor lacks a capacity to facilitate this cycle, for instance, because of the nature's degradation within the scope of this research, it ignites a variety of societal reaction to push state actors search for addressing the deficiencies. This effort, for sure, may be in the form of achieving smart solutions or furthering the degradation of the nature until the nature could not respond to the marginal events. But governments concerned with the voting behaviors of the citizens or regime's security, mainly taking the young generation as the targeted audience in the political system, may also disregard the nature's preservation for their ostensible security. Hence, the sense of the securitization for the unconscious individual and demanding mindsets of the societies can be correlated to the production and consumption continuity through the state authority. The state actors may face the challenges of their own subjects to sustain the production and consumption cycle with further nature devastation. As a result of this pendulum, humanity, which is the emerging unit of analysis, is vulnerable for the nature's degradation we have witnessed right now. Furthermore, a newly emerging phenomena, which is digitalization, is deepening the crisis of state, individual, society, nature pendulum. Individuals are consciously digitalizing themselves while being exposed to virtual globalization. The consumption habits are subjected to the outcomes of artistic digital environment and interactive exploitation of digital media through well-developed and accessible technologies, which encourages consumption in differing varieties. Virtual and digitalized life pretends to be intrinsic and isolated, though it is not. It has been commercialized with an outcome while deeply devastating nature. For instance, digital currencies facilitate a virtual enrichment of the individual, while consumption of electricity results with more carbon emission with a challenge to the economic authority of the states. Furthermore, digitalization requires having access to rarely found metals that the basic technology is dependent on turning the land upside down, mainly of the poorly regulated and underdeveloped countries. Hence, individuals and societies with limited consciousness on how it has been made up attempts to exploit the digital world, disregarding to what extent the facilitating equipment is wrecking the nature with its ecological footprint and rucksack. The direct effect of digital world is not only about interest groups of varying sorts in the societies emerging independently. They can form digitally interacting networks to raise a demand to urge state actors to respond. The contextual transformation of state-led services makes the societal networks demand not only vital needs of daily life, but also postmodern ones. In this sense, digitalized ideas of which are creative and beyond the traditional interpretation push state actors to abide by the demands of the self-styled networks. For instance, subsidies with traditional insights do not satisfy the expectations of these networks, but new phenomena such as free circulation of online tolls, digital currencies, online shopping, and virtual freedom of expression. State actors feel compelled to liberalize the society, as is a fact in the conservative Gulf societies, disregarding the nature preservation and resource scarcity for the sake of either state or regime security. This research, in accordance with the aforementioned findings, questions to what extent the digital transformation could either manipulate or promote the efforts of nature-friendly practices. In this sense, digital transformation multiplied the escalation of resource demand that states have been the primary regulator to address the demands of the newly emerging Z generation, but the preservation of nature and resources are not priorities, but consumption security of the citizen and respectively and durability of the regimes and functionality of the states. Consequently, the idle networks, which has been formed up by the interaction of random individuals and varying sorts of interest groups in the societies, may manipulate the state authority by their persistence in demanding consumption. This trend might be the exchange of consumption security with the desecuritization of states' credibility, nature's sustainability, and resource inavailability. That concludes my proceeding. Thank you so much for your patience and waiting for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your valuable presentation, Dr. Murat Aslan. Our next guest is Professor Dr. Adel Ali Said. Unfortunately, he was unable to connect this session. However, he has shared his keynote presentation with us, and I would like to share his pre-recorded video to you.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Good evening, everyone. And before I have to start to present my presentation of today, I would like to thank the committee to invite me to be one of the speakers in this really interesting conference. My presentation will discuss on somehow on the sustainable approach for the eliminating emerging pollutants, APS, from non-clinical environment. This is me, Adil. I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Hussein, Malaysia, and this is my email and my phone number. Okay, what is the emerging pollutants? What are the emerging pollutants? Actually, we mean by emerging pollutants so many of the, let's say, the aromatic compounds, or sometimes they give name of the xenobiotic compound, or pharmaceutical and personal care products, PPCPS, Currently, some of the researchers, they use the term of contaminants of the emerging concern, CECS. The idea for all of these compounds means is somehow some new compounds, we synthesize it in the laboratory and we use it like antibiotics or pharmaceutical or personal care products. After we use it, we discharge to the environment. As a product, like personal care products, they don't have any toxicity for us. We use it safely. But after we discharge these compounds to the environment, up to now, we still don't know the degradation between the reaction of this compound in the environment, because we have a lot of the induction factors like light, like temperature. So all of this combined, they collected in one area. They have some of reaction or chemical reaction between them. They are going to produce some of secondary metabolites or metabolic or secondary products. But we don't know about this secondary product. Is it safe or no? Is it toxic or no? Some of the reports already mentioned that they have low toxicity, but somehow they still have effect on the reproductive effect, especially in the fish. So they change the gender from male to female or from female to male. In the human cell, there is no reports about this topic. The main issue with this compound is the absence of the regulation or legislation. It's not like what we are looking for, chemical pollution, or when we go to find the biological contamination for the water, we have to find some of the indicator bacteria or some of chemical characteristic like COD, BOD, TSS somehow. These compounds, we have to find it one by one. So we have to use the LCMS. So when we come to use the LCMS, it means we have different or specific procedures for each of the compounds, and we cannot use the indicator. So in terms of the laboratory work, is difficult to detection. In terms of the cost, is very high cost to detect each compound inside the wastewater, if there is or no. And we are not sure that if this compound still survive like persistent compound like antibiotics or personal care products, or already changed to another secondary product. Many of the research have been done on these compounds, emerging pollutants in US, in Australia, in China, in India, in so many of the countries. The source for these compounds is the pharmaceutical factories, agriculture activities like fertilizers and pesticides, residential area, personal care products, pharmaceutical as a source for the antibiotics, from hospitals and nursing also for the antibiotics and other of the medicines, wastewater treatment plant as the source for antibiotic resistant bacteria and also many of the antibiotics, since the 90% of the antibiotics that we take it for the medical treatment is discharged with the urine or passed with the urine to the wastewater treatment plant. Among of the emerging pollutants, we are going to focus only in this speaking on the antibiotics. We have a lot of antibiotics since maybe around 80 years since they discovered the antibiotics, produce a lot of the antibiotics. Some of the antibiotic is synthesized in the lab, some is semi-synthesized, some is produced by the microorganisms. We still use many of these antibiotics for the infection, and in the last years we have discovered that many of the bacteria become resist for many of the antibiotics, and maybe within 10 years we will face a very big issue with the antimicrobial resistance, and we have to find alternative way for the treatment process of the infection with the bacteria or fungus or virus or whatever. So usually we have to think about the environment. We think the problem coming for the antimicrobial resistance for among the bacteria, is coming from the environment. It's not coming from the random. Yes, we know that the random utilization of the antibiotics is contribute effectively in increasing of the antimicrobial resistance, but the main issue coming from the environment, from non-clinical environment, is not from the clinical environment. definitely we have to remove all the antibiotics from the environment. But to eliminate or to remove the antibiotics from the environment, we cannot do it by using the primary or secondary or tertiary treatment that we usually do it for the wastewater treatment plant. We have to find more accurate, more advanced technology to remove. Like what? Like the nanotechnology, like the adsorption, like the coagulation with the electrocoagulation. We have to go to photocatalysis. Many of the technologies have been reported to remove the antibiotics, but if we want to go to discuss in the deep, we have to find that we are going to find that most of these techniques is still in the lab scale. There is no technician have been used for the large scale. There is up to now, there is no, for example, we cannot find in all pharmaceutical factories, they already have advanced technology to remove of antibiotics from the wastewater discharged from the factories. We still have so much problem with the antibiotics in the environment, and we have to do more. In terms of the nanoparticles, okay, nanoparticles, they have two properties or two characteristics. They can use those characteristics to remove or eliminate the antibiotics from the water and wastewater. One of them is photocatalysis. If we are going to use zinc nano-oxide like catalyze for removal of the antibiotics, definitely these nanoparticles will work or will act to remove the antibiotics by using the photocatalysis. Okay, but there is so many of the advantages and disadvantages for the photocatalysis, especially with the zinc nanoparticles. Some of the reports they mention about the zinc nanoparticles is not that very efficient to remove the antibiotics because there is leachage. Some of the nanoparticles will go to the water or wastewater, and this is some of the difficulties to produce of the nanoparticles. So we really focus on the production of the zinc nanoparticles by using the bio nanoparticles, by secondary metabolites products of the aspergillus, for example, or any type of the microorganism. We produce two types like nanoparticles or like composite nanoparticles, and we have to we usually use the nanoparticles for photocatalysis, and we will use the nanoparticles composite for the adsorption of the antibiotics. But when we come to discuss on the adsorption, we have to find that there is the affinity of the antibiotics to be removed or to be absorbed to the composites or for any adsorb is less than the affinity of the heavy metals. So if we have wastewater contaminated with the heavy metals and with the antibiotics, we are going to find that it's very difficult to remove the antibiotics in the presence of the heavy metals. So we have to remove the heavy metals first, and then we have to make second round or second treatment to remove the antibiotics. Actually, this one is expensive process. If we are going to do like that, it will be more cost. One more thing, actually, when we are going to use, for example, the secondary metabolites of the fungus or bacteria, we are going to use commercial media and then more cost. So our idea usually we use the agriculture waste as a production media for the microorganism. Then we are going to produce a lot of the supernatant from the fungus or from the bacteria, and then we can use to produce of nanoparticles. But I have to mention to you again that nanoparticles still in the lab scale. There is no large scale studies conducted on the nanoparticles in the environment. Okay, second treatment technology we have used before, we have used the beta-lactamase. We know beta-lactamase is one of the main issue or one of the main mechanisms that microorganisms use it or bacteria use it to resist the antibiotics. So what happens if we use these properties or this enzyme generated by the bacteria that have ability to resist the antibiotics to be used for degradation of the antibiotics in the wastewater? Okay, we have tried this process before, and we have found that's one of the bacteria. This bacteria is Bacillus subtilis, and we find this bacteria have the ability to grow on the different type of the antibiotics. Even inside the wastewater, bacteria have the ability to grow, and we have investigated the removal according to the sum of factors: pH, time, inoculum size, and the agitation speed or whatever. So many of the factors we investigate. We find that the bacteria have the ability to grow and to produce like biomass on the wastewater. It can also produce like beta-lactamase, but in this process of what we said biodegradation, the efficiency is not that very high. We talk about 3%, 30% or 40% of the degradation process, and we need a lot of the beta-lactamase to be produced, and we cannot recycle or reuse the beta-lactamase again, and we need to use the mobilization process to make the enzyme more feasible or more applicability, has more applicability to remove antibiotics from the wastewater. But at all, the using of biodegradation by using the microorganisms that have the ability to produce the enzyme still is not as very efficient according to our work. Okay. If we want to talk on the antimicrobial resistance, I don't think so. There is someone here in this conference attend, and I have no idea about the antimicrobial resistance. Most of the people, doctors, lecturers, or researchers, they know that we have a big issue, and we are coming for the difficult future with the antimicrobial resistance. Okay, as I mentioned to you before, the clinical environment is small, very small part that contribute in the increasing of the antimicrobial resistance, and the main issue is coming from the environment under that what we said natural selection process. What I want to highlight for you here, many of the researchers maybe think that the bacteria become resistant to antibiotics because this bacteria face or contact, let's say contact with the antibiotics at one time, and then they develop mechanisms to resist the antibiotics. But this is not 100% true. We talk about the antimicrobial resistance, we talk about the antimicrobial resistance gene, we talk about the mobile genetic elements like plasmid and transponsors, and we talk about the QMRA. Okay, QMRA is something else different, and we said the bacteria can be resistant to the antibiotics with even if the bacteria have not faced the antibiotics before or have not exposed to the antibiotics before, because this bacteria received the antibiotic resistance gene from the other bacteria through the horizontal transfer of the genes. But some of the researchers didn't agree with this idea, and they said the bacteria can be resist the antibiotics even have not received any antibiotic resistance gene from another bacteria and have not exposed it to the antibiotics at all. What we mean by that? That we mean bacteria have the ability to resist antibiotics, and something is under the selection process. Let me explain more. Okay, number one, if we want to say this bacteria received the antibiotic resistance gene, yes, the bacteria received. This is one of the mechanisms or one of the process that the bacteria become resistant to the antibiotics, because they received antibiotic resistance gene from other bacteria. But when we come to make a solution for this bacteria, we couldn't find this bacteria. According to one of the sample we have analyzed it by using the metagenomic analysis, and we take this sample from the sludge sample, we found that bacteria, or 90% or more than 90% of the bacteria is non-culturable. In cultured bacteria means we cannot get pure culture. We cannot do subculture for this bacteria in the culture media. That means this bacteria have the ability to transfer the antibiotic resistance gene from this bacteria to another bacteria, and we increase the ability of the bacteria to resist the antibiotics. So this is one of the methods that we know. One of the method is bacteria receive the antibiotic resistance gene from another bacteria and then become resistant. Okay, why this bacteria cannot be cultured? Because this bacteria is available under the name of viable but non-culturable, VBNC, and this is totally different from the spores of bacteria. Spores of the bacteria is one of the mechanisms that some species of gram-positive bacteria have the ability to produce spores, but the available but non-culturable bacteria can be available also in the gram-positive or gram-negative, or even some of the fungal spores. They can go to this available but non-culturable, means the bacteria have the all genetic materials inside, but when we come to use this bacteria or to grow or to make culture for this bacteria in our culture media, the traditional one, nitrogen agar or whatever, we cannot find this bacteria, but this bacteria is still available in environment and contribute effectively in the distribution of the antimicrobial resistance gene. Co-selection of antibiotic and heavy resistance. As we mentioned before, that some of the bacteria maybe have the ability to resist the antibiotics even without exposed to the antibiotics itself. Some of the they have mentioned this is co-selection of the ability of bacteria to resist antibiotics even without exposed to the antibiotics, but this bacteria may be exposed to the heavy metals. This may be because there is what we said, the plasmid. In this plasmid, there is gain resistance for metal and gain resistance for antibiotics. So, when the bacteria receives the resistance against for the metal, or when bacteria receive the plasmid from other bacteria, this plasmid, of course, will have or will carry two types of the gains, one for metal and one for the antibiotics. And this is why the bacteria, most of the bacteria that resist the heavy metals, will be also resist for the antibiotics. To verify this information, we go to the lab, we went to the lab, and we have used 67 bacteria isolates. This bacteria we use as a pure culture, and we have exposed the bacteria for the nickel concentration for 1, 2, 4, and 6. After each experiment or each adaptation process, we find that the bacteria at the beginning have no high resistance for antibiotic, especially for the ciprofloxacin, but exhibited more than 87% of the bacteria was resist for the cephalaxin among the gram positive and 72 among the gram negative. After expose the bacterial in pure cells or pure isolates or pure strains to the 6 millimolar of the nickel, 100% of those bacteria that have ability to resist 6 millimolar of the nickel become also resist for cephalaxin, even on a gram positive or gram negative, and 85% of the gram positive bacteria become resist to the ciprofloxacin. If we want to now to explain this result, we said maybe bacteria in the environment receive the antibiotic resistance gains because is carried out with the heavy metals gain resistance through the same plasmid. But if we look for here, we are working on the pure bacterial strains, and there is no another bacteria. So of course, bacteria will not receive any plasmid from other strains of the bacteria. So how the bacteria exhibited resistance or high resistance for cephalaxin and ciprofloxacin without exposed to the antibiotics before. We have analyzed the beta-lactamase. Beta-lactamase is one of the enzymes that bacteria use to resist the heavy metals. We find that the bacteria exposed to high concentration of the nickel produced high concentration of the beta-lactamase if we compare with the control. So this one is for bacteria adopted to resist high concentration of the nickel. This one is before. So that means the enzyme beta-lactamase, maybe the nickel can play like a cofactor for beta-lactamase and can also induce the bacteria to produce more beta-lactamase enzyme. Of course, ciprofloxacin is not a beta-lactam enzyme, beta-lactam antibiotic. Is somehow is antibiotics that affects on the DNA grase, is one of the enzyme required for the multiplication. So maybe we can explain actually this result. Maybe the nickel can make mutation for the bacterial genome, and then the bacteria become resist for the ciprofloxacin. Of course, the idea here still need more study, and we still need to do more analysis to understand what happened when the bacteria exposed to the heavy metals and how the heavy metals induce the antibiotic resistance. From this experiment, what we want to show you is that it's not necessary for bacteria to expose to antibiotics to be resistant to antibiotics. There is some other factors. These factors maybe can induce the bacteria to resist the antibiotics. Understanding this mechanism, how the bacteria become resistant to antibiotics in the environment, maybe will help us to make break for the chain of the antimicrobial resistance or for the prevent the distribution of the antibiotic resistancy. In the medical, they have 12 steps to prevent the antimicrobial resistance. They started with the vaccination, and they go to the brain of the child. In environment, we have totally different concept, and we think that's the non-clinical environment is the main responsible for increasing of the antimicrobial resistance. This is why we have came with the new term. This term is the non-clinical environment. It has been highlighted for first time by Walsh by 2013, and also me in one of my paper on 2013 in March, and here it was in February. The idea here is to make some of new standard. This standard for CLSI, okay, we have to provide alternative standards for antimicrobial resistance in the environment, because whatever we have used now is what we use the CLSI or European Committee for Antimicrobial Susceptibility Test, and this is one just only used for clinical, and we have to provide another standard, another regulation for antimicrobial resistance in the environment. By this way, we are going to understand the behavior of the bacterial toward the antibiotics in environment, but not in clinical. Second way to minimize the distribution of antimicrobial resistance is by eliminating or by inactivation of the bacterial cell and also fungal spores. This way, if we are going to use the chlorination or UV or ozone, of course, so many of the bacteria already have resistance mechanism to resist the effect of the chemical disinfection. One more thing is have not investigated in the debate is the nanoparticles. As we know, that nanoparticles can or have the ability to inactivate the bacterial cell by using the physical process as physical action for the nanoparticles. It's not by chemically. Of course, there is some of chemical reaction inside. Up to now, there is no reports have been mentioned that the bacteria have resistance for the nanoparticles, and we still have the opportunity. But as I mentioned before, application of nanoparticles in environment is still limited. Still have so many of the limitation because of we don't have actually the fate of the nanoparticles in the environment and how will affect in future on the biodiversity. Nanoparticles act or make destruction or make inactivation for the bacterial cell by using the reactive oxygen species ROS, which affect chemically and also effect on the cell membrane as we see also in some of analysis by SEM, and effects on the cell membrane of the bacterial or fungal spores and then make it inactive. Okay, this is all for me, and I would like to thank you all so much for listening to me. And there's so many things we still need to discuss, but I think the time 23 minutes is enough for me, and I'm welcome for any one want to contribute for us with our projects. We are focused mainly on the inactivation of the bacteria and fungal spore by nanoparticles and preparation of the bio-nanoparticles from the secondary metabolites of the fungi, and also removal of antibiotics from the environment. Thank you so much for all, and thank you to give me this opportunity of this chance to present some of my work. Thank you so much, and have a nice day. Bye.
Many thanks to Professor Adel for his message. It looks like our other guests are not here with us at the moment. Dr. Murat Arslan and Dr. Hayrettin Küpeli, thank you very much for being with us. And I sincerely apologize for the intrusion, Dr. Küpeli. I would like to ask if you would like to add anything further to your speeches. Dr. Küpeli and Dr. Arslan, anything further, sir?
No, I finished my presentation, so nothing more. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Küpeli.
Thank you.
And Dr. Arslan? Okay, I guess Dr. Arslan is not with us. Okay, it looks like we don't have any questions as well. Therefore, I would like to announce the end of the first session on day 2 of NRSEM 2021. The next session will start at 11:30. Hope to meeting you then. I wish you good and healthy days.
Well,